We have with us the honor and privilege of speaking with Ambassador Bridget Brink. Now, there are a lot of people that talk a big game. There are a lot of people who talk about being courageous. Then there are people who are actually courageous. There are people who stand on business, as the kids say, because they believe something is right or wrong. And that is what this young lady has done. Um, I just want to bring her on. She was the ambassador to Ukraine, and now she is running for the United States Congress. And I cannot think of anybody more qualified in these times to do it. Ambassador, thank you for joining us.
Bobby, thank you so much for having me on.
I remember reading about you stepping away. And for those who don't understand, it's not like they just hand out ambassadorships, right? Especially when you have spent a whole life of public service getting yourself ready for that. So before we get into what you're currently doing, can I ask you just a couple of questions here? Number one, the invasion of Ukraine happens. You're observing all of this. Can I ask you, what did you think? What was the hardest moment for you as ambassador for the United States to Ukraine?
Oh boy. First of all, I want to say it's hard for all the Ukrainians. So certainly I didn't have it any harder, and perhaps in many ways easier, because I had the protections also of that other people did not, a lot of security and intelligence and other things. So it's really tough for the entire country, men, women, and children. I think for me, one of the hardest moments, or the most uncertain moments, was when at about a couple months into my time in Ukraine, the massive missile attacks began. This was in about October of 2022. And of course, they've now been continuing for almost 3 years. But when the first one happened, it was quite shocking. And we had missiles that landed just 2 blocks from where we were, stationed in Kyiv. And we all worried that Washington would recall us and close the embassy, because at that time also there was no air defense. We had yet to provide a Patriot missile battery or anything else. And so what we did, and I'm really proud of this, with this pretty small team of very brave Americans and Ukrainians, is we decided to immediately move ourselves from where we were, move on to the embassy compound, stay there, and describe how we were going to protect all of our people so that we'd be able to remain. And it was many hours that went by. And in fact, I also went out at that time, asked for a meeting with President Zelensky, and was able to have that because the Russians had put out that the American ambassador and other embassies had closed and left, which was not true. So we immediately countered with a picture of that meeting, and also with, I think, good advice to Washington on how we could stay safely. And so it was over 100 missiles at that time. Now there've been thousands more that we faced every single night, and that the Ukrainians face every single day and night. But I'm proud of that, because it showed what people can do and what we can do as a diplomatic presence without military on the ground to help a country repel a full-scale invasion, and not just any country, help Ukraine repel this invasion against the second largest military in the world. It's quite remarkable.
Ambassador, I'm so glad that you mentioned the role of diplomacy here. I'm a 26-year Navy guy, so I know it may sound weird
Thank you for your service.
Oh, no problem. And I know it may sound weird coming from a military guy, but my goodness, diplomacy in action is always, in my humble opinion, the best way forward. When I have to deploy, something failed, right? So
100%.
You have worked for both Democrats and Republican administrations, right? Throughout your entire career. You are not some person that, I cut a big check and they made me an ambassador. You have the actual credibility through a career of public service. Knowing that, can you please explain to me, when was the moment in your mind that you knew you had to step down because of what was happening?
Well, I can tell you it was an incredibly hard decision to make, as it is for anyone in public service. But I found that in the context of a 180-degree change of position with regard to Ukraine, I found that I had to choose between standing and repeating and executing policy I couldn't defend, and compromising my principles, or taking the decision to leave a job that I not only loved, but did for 28 years for my whole adult life. And that happened just because the Trump administration decided at that time was saying essentially that both sides are equally culpable in the war, and putting pressure, in fact, not on the aggressor, Russia, but appeasing Russia, in my view, and putting pressure on the victim, Ukraine. And we all know how that ends historically, and it ends badly. It doesn't create peace. It only creates the conditions for more war. And I thought very firmly, to the bottom of my toes, that it was not the right policy and approach. And in that instance, I felt I had no choice but to step down and speak out, in fact, which is something that we don't usually do as diplomats.
Wow. Again, it was an extraordinary maneuver, an extraordinary moment during an extraordinary difficult time. There's some people in Congress that need to take notes. We'll get to that in a second. My final question regarding your service as an ambassador is, you mentioned Trump's 180 change, the policy change. How do you view the United States as a whole and its policy towards Ukraine? Are we truly abandoning Ukraine? We just signed off on more weapons to go. That was an abrupt change as well from what was being put out. Right now, currently, how do you see the United States government and in its role in trying to support or not help Ukraine?
Well, I would say that the current policy is not strategic. There is an approach, or there is a policy to end the war. I fully support that. But the actions that are being taken are only prolonging the war. Now, we have seen a bit of a shift in the last couple of weeks with President Trump's decision to provide weapons to Ukraine that are bought by NATO partner allies. I fully support that. I think that is a good idea. I wish it happened sooner, but I think it's very good. But there are other things that also can help. And one is to get a hold of the Russian sovereign assets that are sitting in Europe. That's about $300 billion. And that also could be used to buy more weapons. And the third that could also happen is to allow for Congress to pass the legislation, the Graham-Blumenthal legislation, which would increase sanctions, not just on Russia, but really importantly, secondary sanctions on countries that are buying Russian oil, because that is funding the war machine. So my view overall is we have big problems in terms of democracy overseas and support for democracy and freedom overseas, but that also translates to problems that I'm seeing back home here in Michigan in terms of democracy and how actions that are being taken in Washington are actually really hurting the people of my district and my state. And that's why I decided to run for Congress.
It's almost like you have my notes, because I was rolling right into that, Ambassador, because they're connected, right? Yes. So you, anybody who's listened to my show here since I've started, I've been hammering strategic thought and the lack thereof that we're seeing from the administration. There's no national security strategy that's been released. Apparently, it's supposed to be released in the next month or so. But part of the reason why I don't think we've had one is because Trump likes to just shoot from the hip, just whatever he feels like in the moment, whatever wins the room in that moment. You and I both know from different sides of the federal government that that is not only unsustainable, but it is the recipe for chaos, especially when you're supposed to be leading the world, which brings me to your congressional run, right? This is epic, from going from on the ground in Ukraine to coming back home and seeing the connective tissue between Congress, the White House, what's happening in Ukraine, and what's happening in your district. So what made you really decide to do this, right? Why not just chill, write some op-eds and call it a day? Why this?
I just think we're at a very critical moment for our country. And it's really important that principled people stand up in Washington and fight for what's right, because this undermining of democracy and our values overseas is mirrored, by what's happening also at home. And I think, we see it in a number of ways. We see it in how it affects Michigan in particular. We're seeing it in the reckless tariffs, which are increasing prices on numerous goods for Michiganders. We see it in the big ugly bill, which is threatening health care for 25,000 people in my district, as well as threatening jobs and raising energy prices for people. We're seeing it in ways where rights and freedoms are under attack. And I think that in this frame, these are completely related. And so I think I can, and I do, bring to bear an experience, which of course is rooted in our values and interests overseas. But these are also the same ones that affect us here at home. And so I believed that maybe the best way I could use I'm a public servant at heart. It's all I've done as an adult. And I feel the moment is so critical that we need to step up and fight for the future of our country, for our kids' future, for their kids' futures. And this is just so important to me. It just seemed like the only thing to do to try to help make a difference and change the dynamic in Washington for the benefit of all our kids, all their futures.
No, Ambassador, I tell you, you keep leaning into things I'm going to ask you. Your diplomatic experience, I think, is not only timely, but it is necessary. It's needed right now. Dealing with different governments, different types of governments all over the world. How does that experience help you deal and navigate Congress? I mean, the 535 people who's supposed to be there, they're like their own little nations now.
Yeah.
I mean, this is unbelievable. So what experiences, what can you bring to help navigate that atmosphere of dividedness right now to become more effective as a legislator?
Well, first of all, I think I learned in government that, and probably you also in the military, is that you don't accomplish anything alone. Right. So I think that what I can bring is two main things. One, I think there's an atmosphere of fear. And one thing that's needed is for people who are willing to stand up and say, no, the administration is wrong. And here's a better way. Here's a different way. And I think this is something that we need to see. It is happening to some extent, but I think it needs to happen much more. And it needs to be happening in Washington as well. And I have a proven track record of doing that. And the second is I think we need people who can work with others, including across the aisle, and on tough issues to find the common ground and the common interest for the United States. I obviously am one who wants to promote and support and represent my district and fight really hard for it. But I do think we need people with experience. And that's what this career has given me, is experience not only with the highest levels of government, but with a huge swath of our Congress, because I had to go and I was responsible to Congress to report on how we were spending the taxpayer money. And so many members of Congress really held me to account, but also wanted to know what's happening on the ground. What is your recommendation on the way forward? So I think that experience really can be a real plus for me and for my district and state in order to represent the best and to fiercely fight for what's in our interest.
Ambassador, you seem tailor-made for the time and the role. One last question I want to ask you, and I'll let you get on with your day because I'm sure you're quite busy. You're running for Congress in Michigan's 7th district, correct?
Correct.
What do you see as the number one priority or priorities for members of your district? I want to make sure you get that message out. The people who will send you to Washington, what do they say needs to be done?
Well, it's all about the economy. It's economic issues. It's kitchen table issues. It's prices. People are seeing, and I see, that prices in the grocery store are rising. And it means it's just harder for people, working families, to make it. Second thing is benefits that, for example, seniors have earned and should have, including Social Security and Medicare. There's concern about that based on what's happening with Medicaid. And so trying to ensure that both health insurance remains for people who have paid into it and have earned it, but also considering how do we make sure we protect the most vulnerable? And that's where the big ugly bill is a real problem, taking away so much health insurance. It's the cost of health insurance. It's the cost of prescription benefits. And then, of course, it's rights and freedoms. And I think this is something that is of deep concern with the way in which the Trump administration is, I would say, kind of tearing down institutions and attacking things where I think there's lots of room for improvement in government, always, efficiency, being faster. But at the same time, I would argue for an approach that actually achieves that result. And what's happening are changes that slash and burn very important pieces of our government and our institutions. And I think we need to continue to fight for those rights and those freedoms to make sure we're the country that we want to be. So I would want to, if I may, just say, if anyone would want to join me in this fight, I would welcome them. And I can be found at bridgetbrink.com. And I think it's a fight for our future, and it's a collective fight. It's not me alone, it's all of us. And I want to see us be and maintain our position as the strongest, greatest country on earth. And that's what we are and we need to be.
Ambassador Brink, I think like I said, your message and your timing is right on the head. As you can see, we put up the website there. People get involved, even if she is not in your district. The concepts that she's talking about, the international experience, this is stuff, these are things that cannot be replicated. When you watch members of Congress say the most ridiculous things because they don't have the experience or they don't know, they're just looking at talking points, this is the person that can be opposite of that. She's been there, she's done it. And to be quite honest with you, we need seasoned experience right now. We're not trying to read or win a headline. We're trying to create policy, people, programs, and policies. So, Ambassador, I cannot thank you enough for taking just a few minutes out of your busy day. We will direct people to your website, and good luck the rest of the way.
Thank you, Bobby. It's a real pleasure to be on your show, and thank you for everything you're doing. It's great to be here.
No, ma'am. Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
So, ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, there are people who are still answering the call, people who've been there, done that, and want to continue to do that. And to be quite honest with you, America needs more seasoned people, subject matter experts, to step up and take on this role. Because if not her, then who? Like, I'm seriously asking the question. If you have seen some of the comments that Congress has made regarding anything international right now, to include tariffs, to include Ukraine, to include Israel, I really appreciate the support. Please, in the chat on our Substack, let us know if you have questions for next week. We're going to do our best to answer them for you. Until then, stay alert and stay anchored.